Right, how are we doing everybody? Welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're talking about the trail hip, and we're talking very in particular about this sort of feeling of where you should be at the top of your backswing position. The reason why I like to focus very much on the hip area is because I think that although it can look different, which we're going to talk about today, it keeps things very functional and very much as a priority. So in recent videos I've talked about that a great measure to see whether you are creating a decent hip rotation would be to have something against the original position of your trail hip. So like our trusty hip bar, which we're going to build on the channel very soon, right? So we know exact sort of dimensions and all the rest of it. But place an object about hip high. If you trigger a rotation, then you should be moving further away from the hip bar. That's the simplicity, right? The concern is whether you are sliding, or moving the upper body too much over the trail leg, therefore the hip still ends up being closer towards the bar. So that's the simplicity of a rotation, is just turn your hips. So you are essentially moving further away from the object as to where your hip starts off with. Great. You then have a choice, okay? You have a choice in terms of the backswing position, how aesthetically the upper body looks. You can keep your spine angle pretty neutral, which is what most people end up doing when they place the club across the shoulder. So if I pull my hip back, you can see the way that my head would end up moving like so, right? Or you could induce an element of thoracic extension or side bend, which means that you'd end up maybe with your head position slightly more centered. The point is, what this will also do is it will distort the view as to where the trail hip looks. So again, the rotation would look like so. If I end up introducing an element of side bend, you can see the way my hip ends up looking like it goes this way slightly. Now, the definition of a good backswing position is your ability to separate or disassociate. So it doesn't mean that's necessarily how you're trying to start your downswing, but it's the importance in terms of as a definition. See, the thing is, I'm meeting quite a lot of golfers that are telling themselves, as I've said before on the channel, the right thing. They're just taking it potentially a little bit too literally. So I'm seeing people that are trying to keep the head completely still, or they're trying to get this feeling of an activation of the obliques down the trail side upon the top of the backswing. And what's happening is that they're just ending up with too much of like a reverse pivoty motion. And I started to think again, I thought, well, okay, well, hang on a second. If this is too open to interpretation in terms of these feelings and activities, which I'm aware it will be, then we take it right back to basics again. And what we do is we go, right, your golden rule, as we discussed at the beginning of this video, is to make sure that your trail hip, as I mentioned, is moving further away due to a rotational movement. And as long as that happens, then it doesn't matter if you introduce a thoracic extension and your hip gets closer, because at least you know that you should be doing that as well, as opposed to this, for example. So if you're ever uncertain about your backswing position, then most certainly you want to make sure that you, at home at least, do that sort of exercise. Or if you're to video your swing, maybe draw a line against that hip and move further behind. And if you're finding that difficult to see, then maybe from, again, apologies, the behind angle, you can see the way this belt loop here kind of moves back towards you guys. So again, I know that therefore I'm triggering a rotation. Really important thing that you make sure that you fundamentally understand. Therefore, as you're doing the rotation, you also want to try and make sure that you're keeping your trail leg flexed, because this will help you feel like you're pushing pressure in towards the ground. And then it's the composition of the pushing motion and the rotational that will kind of end up kind of introducing the weight somewhere, potentially on the outside part of your trail foot, maybe slightly more towards the heel. But it's the composition of trying to push in towards the floor as if you were going to jump, and also the rotation that would distribute the weight in this way. But the priority is that you very much, very, very much understand that this is going to be very much the key move in the backswing position. If this means that your head therefore ends up moving slightly to the right from your perspective, from my perspective being right-handed, more so than you thought, well, then you can try and induce a side bendy thoracic extension motion. As long as you still have the disassociation, then that's absolutely fine. That would then become much more of a preference and a choice. But priority is this, okay? If you want to try and pull your arms up in the air to give yourself more leverage, that's fantastic. But never, never, ever do something to sacrifice the rotation of the hip, because if you end up with a slide and a reverse pivot, then you're not going to be able to transition. You're not going to have a very good athletic downswing position, and you're going to get yourself in a huge mess. So hopefully you enjoy the video. Hopefully you understand what it is that I'm suggesting. Got to make sure that you get this feeling of turning this right hip back, right, making sure that it's working back. And I'm going to do some videos in terms of some feelings for the backswing position up on this week. But as a priority, placing against this hip, start moving it back, and then understand the thing that will change how professionals look here, whether they look this way or whether they look more this way, will be more due to the orientation of what the spine is doing. It's not like they are shifting this way. Always appreciate a thumbs up and like. Remember, it's absolutely free to press that subscribe button. We'll catch up with you guys again soon.